Coming to you live from the Interaction Media Studio in Morgantown. Welcome to Positively West Virginia. I'm your host, Jim Matuga. Today, we're going to visit with Matthew Byrd. Matthew is the owner of Birds and Bees Honey. They're over in Ritchie County, in Harrisville area of Ritchie County, West Virginia. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about our mission here at Positively West Virginia. Every week, we talk with West Virginia business leaders and share their success stories with people just like you in West Virginia and across the country. Since 2017, our goal is to bring you encouraging and inspiring business stories each week from right here in the Mountain State. We've produced more than 250 episodes now, and Positively West Virginia is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can learn more about our mission of promoting small business and entrepreneurship in West Virginia at positively.wv.com. My team here at Interaction Media and Positively West Virginia, we love telling these stories that, quite frankly, a lot of people never hear about. Our hope is that we encourage people and that people realize you don't have to leave West Virginia to find great business opportunities. They're right here in our state. We want to encourage people to stay here or come here and build a great company or even move back here to West Virginia and be a part of this amazing small business culture here in our state. All of our guests are people who are actually getting that done day in and day out. They're not just talking about it. And I'm convinced we can all learn from their experiences and, most importantly, their stories. Our guest once again today is Matthew Byrd. Matthew is the owner of Birds and Bees Honey in Ritchie County, West Virginia. Matthew, thanks for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to be on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to have you on the podcast to share your story this week. If you don't know, Birds and Bees Honey is owned by Matthew Byrd. Matthew grew up in Ritchie County there in Harrisville. He's always had a fascination with wildlife, and Matthew graduated from WVU with a BS in Wildlife and Fisheries Resource Management. It was when a local extension office in Ritchie County offered a beginner's beekeeping class that Matthew's journey began within the bee community. Currently, Matthew has 15 hives throughout Ritchie County. Birds and Bees Honey LLC is focused on producing high quality, great tasting, small batch honey with a passion for helping the declining honeybee population here in West Virginia and in the country. We invited Matthew on the show today to talk about Birds and Bees Honey and to share their story, give our audience some valuable insight into the company that he's leading right here in West Virginia. Matthew, again, thanks for being with us today. Take a minute and tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So Birds and Bees Honey was established back in March of 2016. I had a passion for honeybees. I never thought I would form that passion, but it was through that beginner beekeeping class I took at the WVU Extension Service in Ritchie County. So when I came to college, I realized that I could do a lot more than just having 2 hives. And I entered in some business plan competitions and launched Birds and Bees Honey LLC. And like you said, my company strives to grow, distribute, and sell the highest quality honey produced right here in our Mountain State. And we do have a commitment not only to producing honey, but to helping the honeybee population here in the state. And we also help people get into beekeeping and help any questions that they may have, and kind of just be a team player.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very cool. Thanks for teeing that up. And I appreciate the background story there. Matthew, one of the things that when I'm hearing you tell the story, so you started this basically when you were a student at WVU. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. Before WVU, it was just a little hobby. I had a couple hives through high school. I started beekeeping when I was 16. I'm a first generation beekeeper. So it was kind of a leap of faith that I took with really no history of beekeeping. Had some great mentors. And when I went to WVU, I also had a high school teacher who had went back to college also. And she was doing a business plan competition through the West Virginia Collegiate Business Plan Competition. Yeah. And she's like, you know what, Matthew, this would be great for you to get into. And I started that and realized that I had a lot more opportunity than I thought I had.
So how did you fare in that business plan competition? How'd you do?
So it was a little terrifying the first year, having no knowledge about business. When I met with the director at the time, she was going over, everything with me, said I needed a business class. And I was a freshman ag student. And the only business class that fit into my schedule was like a senior level engineering class. So we jumped into that and took that. The first year as a freshman, I made it all the way to the semifinals, where it was me and 5 other teams. And I got beat out by a PhD team. But I wasn't upset about that. And I went back the next year to win it all. So
you won the business plan competition.
That's correct. Back in 2017, I won the West Virginia Collegiate Business Plan competition.
That's awesome. What a success story. And so what's the takeaway from that lesson, where you get beat by a PhD team and you're like, oh, I got to regroup and come back. What's the lesson you learned out of that?
Yeah, I think it gave me a lot of experience. I was able to talk to a lot of the other teams that had a lot more business experience. There's 3 rounds. Make your business plan competition. You present it to a panel of judges. You move on. And then you have a full business plan that you are presenting to at the finals. So it was a lot of just background knowledge on, how to be successful in the business world, kind of what people are looking for in West Virginia, how to find your target customer.
Yeah.
So the PhD team, kind of just gave me more of a challenge. I'm like, I made it this close as a freshman. What can I do next year?
Yeah, that's really inspiring just to listen to that. And my takeaway from that is, tenacity. You can't give up, right? You got to learn.
Exactly.
You learn from your experiences, and what you learn there helps you to get better next time. And I think that's super cool. I think that's really awesome. As part of that business plan competition, you have to craft your 30-second pitch. I'd love to ask you what your 30-second pitch is for Birds and Bees Honey.
Yeah, so Birds and Bees Honey was established back in March of 2016. My company strives to grow, distribute, and sell the highest quality of honey produced right here in West Virginia. We not only do honey anymore, we also sell bees. Every year I provide nukes to the public, which is a smaller beehive to get started. You can buy bees in packages or nukes. We do nukes. You already have a queen laying. She has her brood. She already has a head start to go right into the spring to make that honey coming out.
That's awesome, man. You got it down. I love it.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Matthew, what would you say is the thing you're most excited about for your company right now? You've been doing this since, March of 2016. What's the thing you're most excited about right now?
Yeah, so I got a couple things in the works. I think I'm most excited about this coming spring. This past year was the first year we sold nucleus colonies. So I'm going to do that again this year. This year, I'm also going to try to get into queen production, producing queens that are right here in West Virginia to help the local beekeepers. Because a lot of times right now we're buying queens. They're coming out of Georgia, out of California. There is some queen suppliers down here in West Virginia, but we definitely need more of them because if a queen is produced right here in the state, West Virginia, they're already coming from genetics of the honeybees that are used to West Virginia weather. So they tend to do pretty well over winter. You have a higher success rate.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. So you talked a little bit about identifying your target audience. Where do your customers come from right now? What's the geographic area?
Okay. So a lot of my customers right now are coming from the areas around Ritchie County, people looking for that local honey. I have a pretty unique packaging compared to most honey producers. I kind of went away from that typical, you see the honey bear, that's what you're associating with. But I wanted a more unique, sleek looking design. So I find myself targeting people that are shopping in the specialty markets and, doing craft shows and stuff like that is where I, sell a lot of my honey too.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now, you and I were talking right before the show started. This is, in essence, a side hustle business for you, right?
Correct.
It's part-time. You have a full-time job up in Morgantown, and you commute back and forth from Ritchie County.
Correct.
So is it you? Are you a sole proprietor? Do you have other employees? How does that working for you?
Yeah, so right now it's just me. I do have my stepmom and my dad do help a little bit on the side. My stepmom loves to, bottle the honey. My dad, he's little allergic to bees. However, it doesn't stop him from going in there. So always, he still likes to help me out with that. But it's mainly just a one-man show with myself, but I do get a lot of support from my family as well.
Yeah, that's very cool. Now, you guys have, you and your dad and your stepmom, you guys have won some awards for best tasting honey. Talk a little bit about some of the acknowledgments you've gotten out there from the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a new festival that popped up in Ritchie County back in 2018. It's called the Ephraim Bee Festival. They've done 3 years. They, of course, didn't have one last year with COVID. But the Ephraim Bee Festival, I mean, it's a great little festival. They have a honey tasting competition there. It's pretty simple. We just do blind taste testing with the judges, and they kind of pick, whose honey is the best. So back in 2018 and 2019, I won the award for the best tasting honey there. 2021, unfortunately, I didn't get to make it to the competition. So now the big joke is that everybody beat me, but I just tell them how to take a year off. So they didn't think I could win every year.
That's great. That's great. I love your attitude, Matthew. That's super cool. So talk a little bit about your product, your honey. What makes it taste so good? What's the deal there?
Absolutely. So a lot of people think that honey comes from flowers, and it does. You get your clover honey and your different crops, but a lot of the honey produced right here in our state comes from trees, believe it or not. So I have a lot of tulip poplar, apple trees, peach trees, basswood, sourwood, and that kind of what gives my honey the great tasting that everybody likes. The unique thing about honey is, my honey could taste different from somebody else that lives, 10 miles away from me. Every year it has a little bit different taste, but mostly my honey is produced from tulip poplars pretty largely. I do have some apple trees that help with that, but the main crop would be tulip poplar.
Yeah. So how much volume or production are you putting out there each season? What does that look like? Talk a little bit about the numbers.
Yeah, so honey, business is a hard, business because it's directly correlated with the weather. So, too much rain results in not enough honey. The nectar is being washed out of the flowers. If it's too dry, like we've had, the end of the summer here, the fall flowers don't produce nectar. So typically I can average about 5 gallons per hive is what I like to take off. Sometimes I can take off a little bit more, but I like to leave that for the bees because the good thing about honey is it never goes bad. So if I don't get to it this season and I leave too much on, I can harvest it in the spring because I'd like to make sure that my bees have enough honey for themselves to get through winter.
Yeah, that's awesome. Matthew, since you've been in business since March of 2016, what would you say has been your best business moment since you've been in business?
I think my best business moment was coming back in 2017 and winning the collegiate business plan competition, just because it opened up so many more avenues for me. It was publicity. Between that and the Mid-Ohio Valley Chamber of Commerce did a business plan competition that I won in 2016. So with those two, just those two competitions itself, it awarded me, $15,000 to start up my business. So that was just a huge load off my shoulders. People are wondering, how can I get started with business? I have these ideas. I don't have the funding, but the funding is out there. Just look a little bit for it. And with the funding, it came with a lot of resources and teams to help me really nail down, my graphic design work, for my labels, my logo, and to kind of get that initial packaging launched.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I'm intrigued by something you said there with regard to funding sources. I hear that quite often. One of the reasons, and a lot of times you hear this from people that are sitting on the sideline saying, I can't find funding, therefore I can't start my business. But if you're industrious, you can look for, it doesn't take a whole lot, right? I mean, you didn't need $3 million of seed funding, right? You were able to do this with, a shoestring. And talk a little bit about, what's your goal with this? We mentioned it's a side hustle, part-time business right now, but what is your goal with your company, Birds and Bees Honey?
Yeah, so my goal is to become one of the largest honey producers or bee producers in the state. I don't only want to just produce the honey and the bees, but I like to get the youth started in beekeeping. And that's one of my big goals, is to be a mentor, because it is hard to be a young beekeeper, and you don't get a lot of young beekeepers anymore because it does take a lot of time and resource and money to get started in bees. So I would love to start looking at mentorships and getting the younger people started in beekeeping.
Yeah, that's super cool. I got to ask you the $100,000 question. You do a business plan. I know from my personal experience starting a business, almost going into our 11th year here. About the second week, I realized that my business plan had a lot of flaws in it. How much of your business plan are you following? Talk us through that experience.
Yeah, so my original business plan competition was to come out of the gates with 40 to 50 hives and launch it that way. Obviously, I realized I was way over my head at that time. It's a lot to manage, but I still sticking to it. And the great thing about a business plan competition is it's just a plan. You can change your plan and you scale it up or down however you see fit in your business. And I think it's important to go back and look at that business plan and change those, so you create those more realistic goals. But otherwise, with the packages and producing quality honey here in the state, I think we're following that perfectly. And it's just step by step, kind of doing it. You can't do everything in year one. So
yeah. So we talked about your best business moment. Let's talk about the flip side of that. What's been your worst business moment since you've been organized as a company? Tell us that story.
Yeah, I would say it was probably the winter of 2017, 2018. We just had a bad winter. It was a bad year for bees. And I went into winter with, 30 hives, and I came out with 12. And there was a combination of, we didn't have a lot of pollen that fall. I wasn't thinking, young beekeeper, that, how important the pollen was in the fall. So they ran out of a lot of food. So they, either starved to death, or bees are pretty unique in the fact that they will always maintain a temperature in the mid to high 90s inside the hive, no matter how cold it is. But if it stays cold for too long, they will stay in that cluster to vibrate, to keep warm, and they will starve to death because they won't move up or down, up or to the sides to grab that honey. So I did lose a lot of bees that winter, and I think that was probably one of my biggest setbacks.
Yeah. What was your takeaway from that experience?
Takeaway was, just to nowadays I will put in quilt boxes, which kind of controls the moisture in the hive, because that's the number one killer in the winter, is that moisture, cold water condensation dripping on that cluster of bees. And then I also put candy boards in the hive, just in case they blow through the food, just like us. Some of us eat more, some of us eat less, and bees are the same way. And so I kind of give them that, I call it my insurance, to make sure that they have enough food to get through the winter.
Yeah, good stuff. Great lessons learned for sure. Matthew, I want to take a second just to mention our sponsors for Positively West Virginia. They include the State Journal, wvnews.com, and Interaction Media. The support we receive from these West Virginia companies allow us to highlight the incredible things happening throughout the great state of West Virginia, especially in business. Our guest today, once again, is Matthew Byrd. Matthew is the owner of Birds and Bees Honey. He's over in Ritchie County in Harrisville, West Virginia. Matthew, I want to get right back to it. What's the vision that you have for Birds and Bees Honey long term? I know you talked a little bit about that, but if you could say next 5 to 10 years, what's your vision for Birds and Bees?
Yeah, next 5 to 10 years, I definitely want to see Birds and Bees with over 100 hives. And we are looking at getting into more of the specialty honeys. So I got a couple different flavors of honey in the works, kind of thinking along the lines of infusing honey with natural spices, peppers, and that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. That sounds great. You talked a little bit about branding and your logo design and all that kind of stuff. How do you attract new customers?
New customers, the best way to attract customers, I think, is getting out there and talking to them. So when I hear of a craft show or something coming up, like the West Virginia State Honey Festival, it's my go-to. I go out, I have a display, I talk to the customers about my honey. We talk about sampling. I have honey straws that they can sample, take away, instead of making that commitment. And I give them my number and email. If they have any questions, feel free to give me a call. But definitely being out there, shaking the hands, talking to people about the bees, why it's important is how I make my customers.
Yeah, Matthew, thanks for sharing that. What's one of the biggest challenges you face right now?
I think one of my biggest challenges is, jars. Finding jars during COVID was a huge, problem there for a while, because, where I got my jars from, they kind of switched from producing jars for the public, and they went into helping the medical field. So just finding the jars and the lids packaging wise would probably be one of my struggles. But also the weather of West Virginia, very unpredictable. So like I said, my honey production relies, directly on the weather, making sure it's not too cold, too hot, too rainy. All the variables play in.
Yeah. Matthew, I appreciate your energy, your wisdom that you're sharing here with us. What's one of your guiding principles of leadership? What's your mindset on leadership?
I think leadership is huge. You've got to be that leader, no matter what you're doing in life. So, I always try to take the forefront to do so. And, without leaders, you're not going to get to that next step. So no matter what you're doing, whether it's business or, job, whatever, you've got to be that leader to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any, principles that you kind of rely on as a guiding force in your business?
Get up early. It would be definitely one. If not going to be successful, just sticking to an 8 to 5 schedule, whatever it is. I'm up early, and bees early. Spend long days, and just not putting things off. Don't be that procrastinator. Get things done, and then celebrate the wins after.
Yeah, absolutely. What's one piece of advice you would give to young business thought leaders? Maybe they're thinking about being a business owner, an entrepreneur. They're thinking about taking that step of business ownership. What's one piece of advice you would give to somebody that's kind of like was in your shoes back in 2016?
Yeah. So my number one advice is get out there and find mentors, talk to business owners, ask questions, because I found a lot of business owners, especially here in West Virginia, want to see others succeed as well. So it's a little scary making those first steps, but besides that, make commitment to yourself that that's what you want to do and that's your passion. Go for it, and you're going to fall. You're going to make mistakes. Things aren't going to be successful, the first time, but get up and try them again. For example, I didn't win that first business plan competition, and I had one of the judges come up to me afterwards and he said, "You know what, Matthew, you did a really great job. I'll see you next year." And I think it was that moment, that I was like, okay, I can do this next year. So
wow,
try again.
Yeah, you never know how one sentence could affect somebody, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's super cool. I really appreciate that. What's one thing that you do every day, Matthew, that you think contributes to your success?
One thing I do every day is that contributes is probably reading and listening to podcasts, getting more ideas. I'm a podcast fanatic. I don't listen to the radio when I'm in the car. It's always a podcast of leadership or business of some type. And just getting out there and learning more. You've got to continue to learn to grow.
Yeah, you teed up my my next question. I always ask folks to share a podcast or a book that they'd recommend for aspiring entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. So besides, of course, Positively West Virginia, which I just recently found out about a couple weeks ago, I've been listening to them all the time. Another, set of podcasts I really like is pretty much anything from Ramsey Solutions down in Nashville. They got some great ones. Entree Leadership is what I listen to a lot, and really helps, give me the energy to, take my business to the next level.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I appreciate that. Yeah. We actually have a link to that. That's one of my favorites as well. I listen to every episode of Entree Leadership, and And yeah, the folks at Ramsey Solutions, it's kind of interesting watching their whole business model develop too, and
Yeah.
you can see how they're evolving constantly and never resting on their laurels. So that's a good recommendation. I definitely would recommend that one as well. Matthew, we've covered so much in this interview in just a short time. Is there anything else you think our listeners should know about your story, or, I mean, or about Birds and Bees Honey? I mean, I love the fact that you're a West Virginia guy. You grew up there in Harrisville, you went to school at WVU, left for a short time to go to North Carolina and surf fish and work down there for a little bit, and then came back here. And I think it's just awesome. And I think that there's no doubt in my mind that your side hustle is going to turn into a full-time gig, and you're going to be very successful agribusiness person.
Thank you.
Is there anything that I left out of your story there?
I don't think so. I think we talked about a lot of it. I encourage anybody that has interest in not only beekeeping, but any ag business, feel free to message me on Facebook. When I started beekeeping, I didn't know a lot. And if it wasn't for other beekeepers that took the beginner beekeeping class with me, I wouldn't have the knowledge that I do today. We formed a club called Mountaineer Beekeepers. We meet in Ritchie County. We do a lot of community outreach in schools talking about beekeeping, because it's just not about making money, but it's about expanding the knowledge of honeybees. People think they're scary. They're not like yellow jackets. They're pretty nice. We do cutouts at people's house. We have a cutout team where we go out and we'll remove the bees from their house, barn, whatever it is, fix it back up for them. That way we can help the bee population.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's great stuff. And I think that, it's that diversification of your business, right? You're not just a beekeeper, which is an important thing. You're not just a honey producer, but you've got all these other things that are tied into that could be multiple revenue streams for you, that if something maybe falls down a little bit, or you don't have the weather, or you don't have the production, you have other streams of revenue that can make sure that your business is strong and vibrant.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Matthew, as we close out our time here today, how can our listeners learn more about Birds and Bees Honey, and perhaps even contact you? You mentioned, giving out your number.
Correct. Yeah. So great way to contact me is through either my website, birdsandbeeshoney.com. You can message me on Facebook, which is probably the best way to get a hold of me. Send me a message through my Facebook page. It's Birds and Bees Honey LLC. And then on that page, I have my email address and my phone number. You guys can email me, you can call me, message me. I definitely will get back to you.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll make sure we have links to all that in the show notes section and on the Facebook Live page as well for Positively WV. Matthew, it's been a real honor to have you on the show today. I think as a young person, you've got a lot on a lot of great knowledge and wisdom to offer, and got a great head on your shoulders. And I think what you're doing is really great. I just want to encourage you to keep up the great work, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of Positively West Virginia. Positively West Virginia is brought to you by the State Journal, WVNews.com, and Interaction Media. As we continue on our journey to help share positive stories of people and companies doing amazing things all across the Mountain State, just like my new friend, Matthew Byrd of Birds and Bees Honey over in Harrisville, Ritchie County, West Virginia. Our hope is that we in some way equipped you and inspired you with this business story. If you or someone you know would be a great guest on the show, drop us a line on our website at positivelywv.com. We appreciate your comments, your positive reviews and encouragement. And of course, we love it when you guys share these episodes on your social media channels as well, and help us get the word out about these great companies and people doing all kind of amazing things in West Virginia. And be sure to check out our weekly show, the Positively West Virginia Small Business Mastermind, every Friday from 11 a.m. to noon, 1 hour, where we bring a panel of business experts from around the state live each week to help West Virginia small business leaders win. And if you'd like to catch up on the video versions of our Positively West Virginia or our Small Business Mastermind, visit our YouTube channel, where you can Check out all the compiled highlights of each week's shows and all links to all the channels or all the episodes that we have produced there as well. And we'll have a link to that page on this episode's post. Positively West Virginia is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can learn more about our mission of advancing small business and entrepreneurship and focusing on these positive business stories from around West Virginia at positivelywv.com. On behalf of our entire Positively West Virginia team and our Interaction Media team here in Morgantown, including our producer today, Mr. Hampton Hill. Until next time, I'm your host, Jim Matuga. Stay positive, West Virginia. For more positive stories of people and businesses doing amazing things all across the Mountain State, be sure to subscribe to our channel. And also, we live stream every week on Facebook Live. Stay positive, West Virginia.